Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Zach Valisi. Today on Squawk Pod. Wall Street on edge over fears the Iran conflict could drag on. CNBC's Dan Murphy on the global energy markets.
We are seeing war risk premiums on the rise now.
And Democratic Senator Tim Kaine on the opposition from some in Congress to President Trump's strikes in Iran.
I believe we should not go to war illegally in violation of the Constitution.
Plus, Anthropic's AI agent gets a popularity boost while feuding with the Pentagon.
Talk to Claude about that. It's kind of
Who?
Claude.
I don't know.
Tech executive Niki Christoff, host of the Teched Up podcast, on the politics and policy struggles emerging during super fast innovation.
In this moment, as we are in the middle of strikes on Iran, the government wants to use the best. Claude is the best.
It's Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand by, Joe. In 3, 2, 1. His mic. Cue.
Good morning and welcome to Squawk Box here on CNBC Live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Joe Kernan along with Kelly Evans, who were like this, which is right. Usually, if we have someone, Becky's doing her Cures conference today. Normally we would put you there, but I have been told this is my bad side.
So you want to stare, like I feel like we're in combat here. Not to make a combat reference.
We don't. You mean because of the person that's usually there?
Well, it's an intense positioning to be faced.
No. We'll be nodding. We'll be finishing each other's sentences.
Let's get the latest on the fighting across the Middle East. CNBC's Dan Murphy joins us now from Dubai, which has had its share of fallout as this goes on. Dan, good morning.
Kelly, good morning. Well, the security situation in the Gulf has deteriorated in the last 12 hours. 2 Iranian drones successfully hit the U.S. Embassy compound in Riyadh this morning, forcing the State Department to order all non-essential personnel in Qatar, the UAE, Bahrain, Jordan, and Kuwait to leave. Emirati air defenses also intercepting Iranian missiles and drones over Abu Dhabi this morning. Authorities here say they are facing sustained barrages now. And in the north as well, Israel also sending its forces deeper into Lebanon to combat Hezbollah. But as you've just flagged, the big factor for markets right now is the de facto closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian state media now threatening to target any vessel attempting that transit. The Pentagon says the lane is open, but the insurance market is saying otherwise this morning. We are seeing war risk premiums on the rise now, both Brent and WTI moving on up in tandem. And in the gas markets as well, Qatar Energy, this is one of the world's largest LNG suppliers, is completely offline due to a drone strike. That is 20% of the world's LNG supply gone in 48 hours. So the situation here is evolving fast. And behind closed doors, Bloomberg also reporting today that the UAE and Qatar are pressuring Washington now for a diplomatic off-ramp. But Washington also signaling in the last few hours that this Operation Epic Fury could last a month or more. So the bottom line here is Wall Street is looking at $80 Brent and ultimately wondering how soon all of this starts to impact the global economy. Kelly?
Yeah, and Dan, when we look at the oil price, obviously we're following the U.S. benchmark, WTI, but Brent prices are even higher. And of course, we saw natural gas prices spiking yesterday. And I don't know if there's any relief on that front yet, because it depends a little bit on what happens with that Qatari producer.
Exactly. And we're seeing a risk premium in both Brent and WTI right now. Of course, at the weekend, we saw OPEC moving to ultimately try and calm fears here, adding more barrels back into the market. But you have to really wonder here, when we have the Strait of Hormuz, that critical oil choke point essentially offline, and now the Iranians directly targeting Gulf energy infrastructure, including in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and also elsewhere, then the real risk here is what could be an oil price shock that the market is looking out for. And remember as well, here in the region, the Gulf, home to some of the world's most sophisticated sovereign capital as well, between the PIF in Riyadh and ADIA and Mubadala in Abu Dhabi and the QIA in Doha. We're talking about trillions of dollars in capital, some of the world's hottest venture and PE players. leaders here obviously really concerned about what's going to happen next, because the story here is much more than oil. Leaders here want to build a safe haven for people and for capital, not necessarily get involved in another long-running war in their own backyard. So they're watching not just what's happening in the markets, but also the direction of travel for this conflict, which ultimately has a pretty big question mark at the other end right now. Kelly?
Yeah, Dan, we appreciate it, and we'll circle back, but I'm glad you highlighted once again what's going on there. I mean, those nat gas prices spiking again, up 40%, 83 on Brent now, as you said, as they're directly targeting Gulf infrastructure. For now, Dan, thanks.
And the average retail price of gasoline at the pump in the U.S. crossing $3 a share or a gallon everything's a share, for the first time since November. We always reference Gas Buddy. See, I would change that name. We're talking about Iraq, Iran, and all these important, Gas Buddy. Gas Buddy. He's
Look,
buddy.
Let's see what you got. AAA, the fuel price gate. I'm sure it's,
Gas Buddy data shows they had already been rising for weeks as refiners transition to summer grade fuel. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the U.S. will work to mitigate rising energy prices. He told reporters Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Energy Secretary Chris Wright would be unveiling some plans today.
Yes, and we knew that going in would be a factor, and so we have a program in place that will begin to be implemented by Secretary Wright, Secretary Bessent. We talked about it last night, again, about this program. We talked this morning, and starting tomorrow, you will see us rolling out those phases to try to mitigate against that.
President Trump is scheduled to meet with the two secretaries early this afternoon.
It's the same thing, for what it's worth, on AAA 310. The all-time high, $5 a gallon, June of 2022. I don't think we're there yet. Meantime, JPMorgan CEO Jamie Dimon says he sympathizes with President Trump over the closing of Trump's bank accounts, but he doesn't think the president's lawsuit against JPMorgan holds water. Here's what he told Leslie Picker yesterday on, I've heard this show, The Exchange. Take a listen.
We were quite clear. I respect the president's right to sue the company. We respect our right to defend ourselves. That's why you have courts. The case has no merit. It's going to have, years of discovery type of thing. And we'll see what happens. But I agree with him. They have the right to be angry. I'd be angry too. Like, why is a bank allowed to do that?
And Dimon said banks are sometimes forced to close accounts of people in order to comply with regulators who could punish companies for bringing reputational risk to lenders.
It was all the Fed and the woke Fed that when some people really criticize the Fed and Jay Powell's purview, it has a lot to do with things like climate regulations that seeped into what doesn't seem like
that was
anything.
But on questions of, so if the whole banking system currently has this whole know your customer thing, right? This is their whole thing.
But with the woke DEI, ESG.
My question would be, is the issue that you must know your customer in order to, for instance, an Epstein kind of situation, for instance.
Right.
Okay. But how do you make a law to ensure that you're not shutting people down simply for political speech? I mean, some you do, some you know.
Well, it gives them cover to do a lot of things that probably, as Jamie Dimon said, if it was done to him, he wouldn't like it either.
It's almost like there needs to be some sort of tribunal or place to go to say, hey, because it all seems like it's happening kind of in the shadows. People's accounts are getting closed, but then, you're trying to prevent really bad kind of stuff from happening. I don't know.
OpenAI CEO Sam Altman says he thinks his company shouldn't have rushed its recent deal with the Defense Department. In a post on X, Altman said, I think it just looked opportunistic and sloppy. A good learning experience for me as we face higher stakes decisions in the future. The post follows news late last week that OpenAI had reached a deal with the Pentagon on using the company's AI hours after President Trump directed federal agencies to stop using rival company Anthropic's tools. A big piece in the front page of the Journal today about the interaction between Hegseth, what do we call it? Yesterday we kept calling him Defense Secretary.
What does he call himself? They call him War Secretary? All right, that's the title.
Maybe they knew because they changed it a couple of months. In his X post, Altman said OpenAI was working with the Pentagon to amend its agreement, including adding language saying the company's AI technology wouldn't be used for domestic spying on Americans. He also said he didn't think that the government should have labeled Anthropic a supply chain risk. It's unclear why the Defense Department appears to have agreed to red lines from OpenAI similar to those that Anthropic was seeking. And it has a lot to do with, I think, a culture clash.
The only thing I'll say about this, it sounds like it was something that was done months or years ago. I mean, this was a few days ago. If there's an issue to be resolved, that should be resolved, right? I mean, it's one thing to talk about it as a tone and as a PR issue, but if there's an outstanding question about what's going on, there's still plenty of time to resolve that. Meantime, Anthropic's Claude chatbot has surged to the top of Apple's free app chart since its public fallout with the Defense Department, War Department, whatever it's called now. The company now says it's bringing a memory feature to its free tier of service. So non-paying users, Claude will be able to remember past conversations when giving answers to questions. That feature was previously only available to paying Anthropic subscribers. Anthropic will also make it easier to import conversation histories from other chatbots. Certainly, I mean, again, did you see that Katy Perry had a tweet or a message sort of saying that she's supporting Anthropic? That's all these celebrities are getting behind it, helping it, big galvanizing public support, getting it to the top of the App Store. So there they go.
Probably not that surprising. If you read it was a lot of it was about autonomous weaponry, and Hegseth said, look, I'm not going to agree to anything that could make it less likely that our fighting men and women have the greatest ability to kill the enemy. And you could see, I mean, we've been through this. We've been through a whole segment of the population that doesn't want any defense contractors. Well,
it's coming back to the fore because
aren't there shareholder services that don't want any investment in defense contractors?
This was a big fight with the Google and everyone else a decade ago.
Right.
Huge fights over whether they were doing business
we don't need
with the government.
We don't need a defense industry.
Then it was a pivot. Then Palantir, the cool kids were at the front of the line, with their military contracts. And now there's kind of, I don't know if it's slipping.
I mean, there's protests on college campuses about a place where the people there are murdering people that are at the protest. When Iran happens, crickets. Not a single person out. And our youth are getting some strange indoctrination. And
now Claude will solve it. They've talked to Claude about that. It's kind of
Who?
Claude.
I don't know.
Anthropic's.
Tease will be next.
Coming up on Squawk Pod, Democratic Senator Tim Kaine on his opposition to the U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran, and his call to return to diplomacy.
To wage offensive war, the framers of the Constitution were absolutely plain. It's been understood since 1787. You got to come to Congress.
Welcome back. You're listening to Squawk Pod, today with Joe Kernan and Kelly Evans. Here's Joe.
Several Democrats have been voicing opposition to the strikes on Iran. Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, writing in a Wall Street Journal op-ed that it's unwise and unconstitutional and is calling for diplomacy instead. Senator Kaine joins us now this morning. And Senator, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
You bet, Joe.
We have had lots of discussions, and I think your side of things has been well represented in terms of, remember the expression, if you break it, you own it. And it could be messy. It could be difficult. Dan Sonor asked me whenever we have someone that has your viewpoint to ask, A, do you at least acknowledge that it's a good thing for the world that Khamenei is gone? And two, just mind-boggling admiration for the U.S. forces and the Israeli forces in being able to carry out what they've done so far.
Yeah, Joe, those are easy questions. No sane person will miss the Ayatollah. And second, of course, I admire the troops. I got a kid in the military. I represent the most pro-military state in the United States. I'm on the Armed Services Committee. They serve wonderfully, just as they did in Iraq, just as they did in Afghanistan, just as they did in Vietnam. They were betrayed by poor civilian leadership in those instances. And that's why I believe we should not go to war illegally in violation of the Constitution. No shortcuts, no easy pass lanes. Let's do it the way we're supposed to, with the debate and vote in Congress, where the reason is put before the American public, and we decide whether that reason is sufficient to justify sending our sons and daughters to potentially lose their lives.
Right. I understand that, Senator, and I know I think you're on Twitter. That you must have seen that some of the things that are circulated, how many times President Obama took military action without a declaration. When did we last have a declaration of war? I think it was.
Well, if you use declarations for or authorizations of military force, which are essentially the same, when President Obama wanted to wage military action against Syria for using chemical weapons, I blocked him. I said, you can't do that without Congress. I insisted that he bring it to Congress. When he wanted to do a nuclear deal with Iran, giving sanctions relief from congressional sanctions without coming to Congress, I blocked him. It is the case that President Obama struck targets pursuant to the 9/11 authorization, where Congress had voted to allow presidents to take action against terrorist groups. That was authorized action. And it's also the case that any president has the right to take action against incoming attacks. So President Biden using U.S. Navy assets to fire back against the Houthis who were firing on our ships in the Red Sea. Any president can take self-defense, but to wage offensive war, the framers of the Constitution were absolutely plain. It's been understood since 1787. You got to come to Congress. That doesn't mean every president has, and it certainly doesn't mean that every Congress has guarded that prerogative. But I've always pledged that I would.
Right, okay. But it's almost a moot point. He's at least has probably 60 days under certain provisions to carry things out. And if we did go your route, Senator, what's happened over the past 3 days is impossible. It could never happen. Even informing Congress at times about certain raids or actions that have to be done in secret, that's not, in the real world, it's not possible. So in the real world,
Joe,
but is this going to be a good? But is it possible down the road you'll look back and say, this was a transformative move. The world is a better place. Iran is, the Middle East is a better place. So many, and I'm not saying it'll get there. It's probably be a long road and years, and it could get messy. It could be Iraq. I'm not saying it. But will you look back on it and say, that took a lot of courage for the president to do that, and it was the right thing? Could that ever happen?
Let me just underline the fact that I made an argument about the Constitution, and you said it was a moot point. I don't believe that. I don't believe the Constitution is a minor matter or a moot point.
I said it's already happened. I said it's already happened, and he's got 60 days, and I don't think...
No. If the War Powers Resolution passes, hostilities stop. That's what the law says. And I'm asking every senator to do what you should ask them to do. Go on the record and declare, are you for this or against this? Anybody who's elected to a job like this should not hide under their desks and say, oh, even though the Constitution says it's for Congress, let's let the president do it and try to evade accountability. We got to be accountable. Service members have lost their lives. Families are being notified today, and they are grieving. Others have been injured. More of that will happen. You're right, Joe. This could end up working out so that there's a new chapter in Iran and U.S. casualties are minimized, or it could end up like Iraq and Afghanistan with 14,000 American service members and contractors dead, 65,000 injured, trillions of dollars spent. We don't know today. The consequences are possibly so massive. That's why the framers wanted Congress involved.
But when I said moot, I mean, this would never happen. We'd be talking about it 20 years from now if we went your route, and it would never happen. And it could be what we needed. They can't get a nuclear weapon. We cannot. I'm sure you agree with that.
Let me focus on that. Can't get a nuclear weapon. We had a deal under which they were blocked from getting a nuclear weapon. The first paragraph said Iran reaffirms that it will never
that ran out.
Acquire or develop. No, the first paragraph said they will never acquire, develop, or purchase a nuclear weapon. Donald Trump tore it up. He tore it up, alienating our allies, pushing our erstwhile adversaries, Russia and China, away, and allowing Iran to sprint. Then Donald Trump obliterated their program. According to him, 6 months ago, they were not on a path to getting a nuclear weapon that raised any imminent threat to the United States, suggesting the need for this invasion.
I mean, how many times are we going to negotiate? Another administration comes in. Iran, meanwhile, is like smiling and laughing as the pallets of cash arrive under some administrations, and and
you
rebuilding.
say pallets of cash.
I think at some point the talking is over. That listening to nodding and John Kerry, pretending that there's a strong enforceable agreement. Sooner or later, you just say, you know what? We need to make sure this doesn't happen for the good of the world and stop the negotiating and allowing them to lie, dissemble, continue to kill Americans and cause trouble in the entire area.
Joe, you're misrepresenting it. There was a deal. Okay. And when Donald Trump wanted to tear up the diplomatic deal, he asked his Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, his Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. They said, stay in the deal because it's working. Donald Trump abandoned diplomacy, and now our service members are dying as a result. Iran has shown that it will reach a deal to block its nuclear path. Donald Trump prefers war, and he doesn't want to come to Congress to ask permission. And so it is Venezuela, it's the Pacific, it's Caribbean, it's Nigeria, it's Iran. Hey, maybe it's Greenland, Cuba, Mexico, Colombia next. We've got
Senator,
go back
he may
to
not
the,
have. I mean, we're talking about the just an interesting coda here. Just kind of quickly on this, the Wall Street Journal thinks that op-ed opinion section that the War Powers Act is unconstitutional. 1973 Vietnam War. So what would ever happen if it's struck down? I mean, is it possible that these actions are more in line with a pre-1973 view of things?
It's a good question. I mean, it's 50 years old. It's not been struck down. So, the Wall Street Journal doesn't get to declare what the law of the United States is. I take an oath to uphold the Constitution, to support and defend it. It says only Congress can initiate war. A president can defend against ongoing attack without coming to Congress for permission. But the Constitution is clear about this, and that is the oath that I take. And as you guys know, the Constitution has some phrases that are incredibly specific. You have to be 35 to be president. Has other phrases that are vague, due process of law. The war powers part of the Constitution is among the most specific, and the constitutional notes about the convention make very plain exactly what they were trying to do. They wanted to restrain an executive's ability to go to war. And at the time, the executive was George Washington. They loved George Washington. They just felt like war was too big a deal to leave in the hands of any one person.
We won't even get into any of the unconstitutional things that maybe certain parties overlook at different points in time.
And we won't get into rising energy prices and the fact that the president isn't focusing on
You know what I'm talking about,
costs,
not enforcing federal laws
costs.
and open board. I mean, there's a lot of, both sides are at fault in viewing the Constitution through a different prism, depending on their own.
Let's just follow it.
Okay, well, let's all live by it then. And
Amen.
We can't go back in time. But all right, Senator Kaine, very good to have you on this morning.
Thank you guys. Take care.
Okay, see you.
Next on Squawk Pod, AI is taking a bigger place on the battlefield. We'll get into how the technology is shaping the current conflict with Iran with industry insider Niki Christoff right after this.
With the AI acceleration as it becomes more powerful and more capable, there is genuine fear that they may not be able to control their own models.
This is Squawk Pod.
Stand by, Joe. His mic, cue.
You're watching Squawk Box on CNBC. I'm Joe Kernan, along with Kelly Evans. Becky and Andrew are off today.
The U.S. strikes on Iran mark a new era for artificial intelligence and modern warfare. Joining us now is Niki Christoff, Christoff Co. CEO. Niki, it's good to see you. And of course, this sort of whole thing continues between Anthropic and OpenAI and the Pentagon. But U.S. forces did use AI tools, we understand, to carry out these strikes. As we think about this as a significant aid on the battlefield, after all, isn't this what we should expect China and other adversaries to be doing?
We absolutely should expect them to be using AI. It is essentially going to be the next phase of weaponry. So we need to be using it. China needs to be using it. And personally, I feel that the U.S. military needs the very best AI possible. And right now, Anthropic does have an extraordinary model.
So Sam Altman has apologized on X, saying the company shouldn't have rushed its recent deal with the Department of Defense. And he outlined revisions to the agreement. He said the company will amend the contract to include new language regarding its principles on topics like surveillance, including wording to clarify that the AI system shall not be intentionally used for domestic surveillance of U.S. persons and nationals. adding that they need to limit, the limitation should prohibit deliberate tracking, surveillance, or monitoring of U.S. persons and so forth. So it's obvious, and again, the Wall Street Journal was talking about this morning, there's personal bad blood a little bit between the Anthropic CEO and Pete Hegseth. OpenAI is trying, it sounds like, to strike a better tone to the relationship while still drawing a red line about surveillance on U.S. nationals. How should we read this in terms of the limitations these companies are really putting on the Defense or the War Department?
Well, I think we need to remember that these companies have evolving terms and conditions and usage policies, and it's not because they haven't thought about these things, it's because the tech is moving so fast. So you mentioned a contract. This whole battle is essentially coming down to something as mundane as contract languages, like did they include the clause, yes, the Pentagon must comply with our evolving usage policies, that's Anthropic. OpenAI, as Sam has indicated, is trying to figure out their contract clauses on the fly. And then you have the Pentagon saying, well, we forgot to put in, we want to use it for any lawful use. So it's as mundane as a contract issue, but it's also much bigger than that because we're talking about theoretical edge cases and potential uses of the technology for things that are either not legal, but even more importantly, not explicitly illegal.
So, Niki, the journal describes a culture clash between the Pentagon and Anthropic. And this article says it really comes down to a disagreement about AI-controlled autonomous weapons. Now,
sorry, go ahead.
But it's just that I look at a lot of tech founders, and you look at the way social media initially came out, or even Twitter and the stuff they were allowed to print, even sometimes on Google. It has to be policed constantly to not get the political ideology of the founders too much part of the product for everyone. Isn't it possible that the same thing could happen here? Do you think in China that the people that are trying to develop autonomous weapons, do they have to worry that the CEO of some company over there is not going to like that it's, what is it too deadly? Why would you not want AI to be involved in autonomous weaponry? Why would you want to tie the hands of Pete Hegseth or the United States and our soldiers by not being able to have that? And can you imagine in China if the CEO said, oh no, we can't have that?
Listen, I take your point that China is very unlikely to put safeguards onto their technology when it comes to war, although they make they're passing policies on safety right now on AI. But I take your point that they're probably not going to. But you asked, why don't we want fully autonomous systems, weapon systems right now? It's because of civilian casualties. It's because the tech is not ready for that. It's not reliable yet for that. There may be a moment when that does work and makes us more lethal, but it could also cause friendly fire incidents. So just not ready.
You'd have to put a provision in that, in the language that Anthropic was using. Could you amend it to that would be satisfactory to the Defense Department as soon as you get it? I mean, I don't know if we want self-driving autonomous cars yet.
Well, so this is,
but that doesn't mean you're not allowed to do it or to eventually develop it once it's ready.
You have just hit on exactly the issue. So there's two problems. One is the tech ready? And you said this about cars. I don't think most Americans are completely comfortable with fully autonomous passenger cars right now. The tech isn't ready. And if that's not the case, why would we want fully autonomous weapon systems that can actually hurt our troops or our allies or civilians, right? So I think that we're dealing with two things. One is the tech. The second is the law. There is no federal law that says thou shalt not kill people with a robot without a human in the loop. It doesn't exist. So when the Pentagon says, hey, we want to use all lawful uses, they're not talking about the things that aren't yet unlawful. And I think right now, most people think we should have a human in the loop. Whether China does it or not, we need to do it in a world-class way, in my opinion, and that means giving us a beat to get the technology ready. But you're right, it's also a contract dispute.
But Niki, just to be clear, when we're talking about the readiness, whose determination is that? Are you saying that the onus is on the government or that the onus is on the companies supplying this technology to make sure? I'm just, this is all new and there's going to be a lot of uses and applications of it that are going to be novel and are going to take some trial and error. And who's responsible for making sure that that is appropriate? I would have to imagine it's the people who are using the technology.
Well, this is a fascinating question, right? You mentioned earlier surveillance. It is illegal to target American citizens with surveillance by our intelligence apparatus. But the incidental collection is enormous when we're talking about undersea cables, when we're talking about data brokers, right? The world is changing, the tech is changing. So we may not be targeted as citizens, but the incidental collection is getting huge. And what AI does is allows the government to process that. So what we really need is Congress, who I'm about a football field away from, to get involved and set the parameters. It should neither be the Department of War, nor should it be private companies. It should really be Congress saying, these are the limits on what we're using this for right now. Now, you and I both know they're not going to do that anytime soon, which leads us to this conundrum where you have to decide, should it be a private company or should it be the Pentagon? Personally, in my opinion, if a company says we're not ready for this, let's set aside, Joe, you mentioned the politics of the founders. Set it aside and just look at the tech itself. They're saying it's just not capable yet to do it reliably.
I'm reading, I love science fiction. The 3 laws of robotics from Asimov, the first one is just not possible to live by. A robot may not injure a human being.
Well, so robots.
We got to throw that one out.
Right, we've already passed that.
We passed that, so we're not going to do these. And these were pretty good. A robot must obey orders, and 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection doesn't conflict with 1 or 2. So. Yeah,
well, number 2,
one is not feasible.
Protect its own existence?
Yeah, protect it as long as that doesn't conflict with the first or second. And the second one, it must obey orders unless that conflicts with the first law, which we already threw out. So none of them are any good.
Well, the second one, though, is a good point, right? That the robot must follow instructions. And in the industry, I know we can talk about the politics of the founders and the different labs and how their partisan leanings, but it's not as relevant as how all of them are thinking, which are these edge cases. And there is fear in the industry. I mean, I've been in this industry for 18 years. With the AI acceleration, as it becomes more powerful and more capable, there is genuine fear that they may not be able to control their own models. Now, that's an edge case, and I don't think we all wake up thinking about that, but they do.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the singularity and Kurzweil. I think about all kinds of things. Do you ever think, when machines know that much, we have no idea what the future looks like when they get to, I think the singularity was 1 billion times the sum total of all.
So that's why you're a crypto
human knowledge.
You just love all this new stuff.
Do I look like someone? I don't shop online. Okay, so no, I don't do a lot of. There was one other thing I was thinking about. I can't remember what it was, Niki, but it was interesting to have you. Oh, I know what it was. Do you see what Larry Ellison said? That they're all the same. All these AI models are the same because they all scrape the same Reddit crap. They all scrape wherever they get everything. And what really will set something apart is private information, which Oracle, I guess, has. And I have noticed a lot of Gigo, for whatever chatbot I use, they find something out in a normal way that's wrong, and they tell me it's true, and it's not. It's just garbage in, garbage out. Still.
Right. So hallucinations are definitely an issue, but I'd like to take, I don't agree with Larry Ellison. They are not the same in the sense that everybody in the industry knows there are better models and there are weaker models. And none of this would be at issue if Claude was not an exceptional world-class model of AI. This military wants to use the best model, and right now that lab is doing an incredible job with their model. So they're not all equal. I mean, Larry Ellison is right that they're going to collect different data over time, but in this moment, as we are in the middle of strikes on Iran, the government wants to use the best. Claude is the best. And so the question is, do they need Anthropic more than Anthropic needs them?
If they want to definitely be patriotic and try and help, because it's a dangerous world, do you expect some type of compromise eventually? Can he come back to the table, Modi?
There is a pattern in this town of people getting into a negotiation with the administration. When the administration gets upset about the outcome, they, wake up and seek revenge. So we heard about the supply chain risk, which is just total bluster. I predict they will come back to the table with a narrower set of contract clauses. There'll be a win claimed for the Pentagon, and we will continue to be able to use Anthropic because it is embedded across our national security apparatus. We don't want to offload the best of the best, and so I think they will reach a compromise.
Niki, thanks. Really appreciate your time this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Niki Christoff.
That's the pod for today. Thanks for listening. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. We're on TV. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern. Or to get the best takes from our TV show right into your ears, follow Squawk Pod wherever you get your podcasts. We'll meet you back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.